William Clouston is here with us. William, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Happy New Year. Just before we get onto the subject of Maggie Oliver and the grooming scandal and Keir Starmer and his far-right accusations, let me just show you this Westfield footage here. You can see it if you're watching now. This is during the middle of the day. You can see the sunlight shining in there through the windows. This is a group of kids, probably teenagers, probably 20 to 30 of them, fighting, punching, kicking each other. At various stages you see a couple of security staff not really doing anything, just kind of walking around. We can't really blame them. They don't want to get in the middle of it. At some point or other, a machete gets pulled out. Two people there fighting with machetes, armed with these things which are about a foot long. God knows how you deal with something like that if you're a security guard on minimum wage. The security guards are just really walking around them, hoping against hope that they don't get stabbed, presumably. Let's get a voice note on this from Gaz.
Just watched that video of those security guards basically doing nothing with those youths in that shopping centre and that knife fight. I wouldn't wade in either because it's not worth getting attacked or stabbed or slashed. But why can't they arm them with something like indelible ink spray, or I know you can't have pepper spray in this country, but, you know, something that makes a really loud noise, anything just to disperse them.
You would think something like that, or throw a net over them or something. I mean, this is going on far too often, I'm afraid, in our shopping centres. We had a video yesterday of a load of kids just going into an Apple store and stealing a load of stuff and running out.
They've got no fear, have they, Mike?
No,
none at all. And that's the product of basically 40 years of liberalism and softness on people. I mean, basically, when you mentioned this event at Westfield, I thought you were talking about Brent Cross. But actually, it's happening daily, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It's ridiculous.
It really is. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday about Turkey, a place where a lot of British people are now sort of going on holiday, an awful lot, and some people have got houses and homes and stuff there, and they said there's no crime there because when somebody does something, they get very severely punished.
There's no crime in Singapore.
No.
And it's safe.
They get incredibly severely punished. You don't have to worry about your phone being stolen, you don't have to worry about your car being nicked, because people don't break the law because they're frightened.
You need a power shift. Yeah. And the streets and in these cases, the shopping centres, these kids are walking around, they've got no fear, you can see it. Yeah. Look, I was appalled by the robbing of that store in Brent Cross. Yeah. And what it will mean is that decent people, families, won't want to go to these places. No. And the whole model of the shopping centre will fail.
It all falls into dereliction, and that's what you see. Let me play you what Keir Starmer said. I know you've probably seen it already, but let's play it just to remind those of you who haven't seen it. This is Keir Starmer's answer to a question yesterday about the grooming gangs.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth, and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
The true facts. Now, I don't know what true facts he means, because facts surely are facts. Whether they're true makes them a fact.
By their nature, He's made a big mistake here. Calling people that are calling for an inquiry or raising this as an issue, a national scandal, calling them far-right, big mistake. Give you an example. When the SDP stood in South Yorkshire mayoral elections twice, and we did very well, saved our deposit last time, got 8%, beat the Lib Dems and the Greens in 3 divisions. We did our work. We always do our work. So we went to see Jane Senior, who was the main whistleblower in Rotherham. She's written the book. She was subject to spurious allegations and inquiries. She was impeded right from the start. She was a social worker that looked after prostitutes working in the nighttime situation. She protected them, and then she got into the whistleblowing from there. And at every single stage, she was impeded. And you know what she is? She's not a far-right person. You know what she is? She's a Labour member. They treat their own people like this. If they raise the issue, they vilify them and stamp on it.
Well, that did that to Simon Danchuk, didn't they? I mean, he was told that not to get involved in it.
And Cryer.
And Anne Cryer as well. They suddenly found themselves out of a job.
But I mean, a lot's been to, and you've covered it really well, but I want to talk about what is at the root of this. And every single interview I see in a progressive that's interviewed about this outrage, you get the same shifting in the seat, the same sort of uncomfortableness. And what's causing it? The cause of this is something that Ben Cobley calls the liberal left system of diversity. They have promoted an idea, Mike, for the last 20 years that society can be broken into two groups, oppressors and victims. You and I, obviously, as white males, we are oppressors.
Yeah.
It's simplistic garbage. And when you think like that, when something like this happens, which is a white working class girls, and the perpetrators are a minority group, their brains just frazzle. They can't deal with the fact that the perpetrators are a minority group, who is one of their favoured groups, and the victims are white girls. Bear in mind that we've had 20 years of government programmes telling people on courses in institutions to check their white privilege, to be aware of their whiteness, and if you vilify people like that, you can't deal with the fact that they can be victims too.
Right. And also to question your own sort of cultural heritage that somehow might be wrong.
Of course. Right? But you wonder why, right? You wonder why Jane Senior had difficulty getting the police in South Yorkshire to deal with this properly. Why? Because for years the police have been vilified as institutionally racist. Yeah. And then when something like this happens, they think, what the hell do we do? Oh, we can't, we better be careful. Right. The only solution to this, Mike, is to treat every citizen on a par. Right. Impartiality. If someone does something wrong, you've got to nail them for it.
But this is why two-tier Keir, as we call him, gets so upset when he gets accused of being two-tier Keir, because he doesn't think it's true. But it's very clearly true.
It's in his mind.
He's doing it again. He did it in the summer. He started calling people far right. Yeah. People got locked up for the most ridiculous things, right? Then many of them are still in prison, suffering at the hands of Keir Starmer's two-tier justice system. Yeah. There's no question in my mind that the judges were told to be very harsh on these people. There's no question in my mind that the people who pleaded guilty were told to plead guilty because that would make it better for them. It wasn't better, it was worse. We also know that the grooming gangs is an embarrassment to Keir Starmer,
well, it's an embarrassment.
And to Labour, and he doesn't want to talk about it.
He doesn't, but what it does is, Mike, this is why you've got to get the theory right. What it's about is that their sort of model of multiculturalism, which is failing in the mill towns. Yeah. It is failing because it's very highly
failing everywhere.
Segregated. Yeah. These are parallel societies. Yeah. And to police societies that you're not from is very, very difficult. It's always been difficult. But they literally every single interview that you see them being completely discombobulated by what is actually happening. Yeah. And I would ask you a question. It's a provocative question, I admit. But if the victims had been one of the favoured minority groups and the perpetrators had been a white group, do you think we'd have heard nothing else but that?
Of course.
We'd have, and instead their reaction is to try and subdue it, try and bury
pretend
it didn't happen. Right. But it's a national scandal, and I think that's a national scandal. Until we get a reset and start treating people fairly and impartially, no matter who they are, we're never going to make any progress.
But these are the same people who have been telling us for years and years and years and years that those who come here on the small boats illegally are fleeing, terrible horrors at home and fleeing war zones and fleeing France, terrible persecution in their home countries, right? And we can't ever question any of them. There's no suggestion that any of them might be actually terrorists, or they might be criminals, or they might be coming here for nefarious purposes to take part in criminal activity. We can't do any of that. But they've all gone very quiet suddenly because now the Labour government is in and they're saying, well, we have to deport some people, even though they're not really doing it. But suddenly now, also, and I saw this with his announcement on the NHS yesterday, he's effectively privatising bits of the NHS. Yeah. Nobody's saying a word.
Well, that's not new. Blair...
but Blair is not Starmer. Yeah. Let's face it. These are the same people who would have said absolutely blue murder if Rishi Sunak had started talking about it.
Yeah, but I think it's important we govern with evidence, on the basis of evidence, and Rupert Lowe has done a great job trying to get evidence on criminality, disproportionate criminality among certain groups. One of those groups is the migrant groups. Yeah. And we don't check these people coming in. They decide to come here, and the human rights law protects them, and then they have most of them stay, right? So they're deciding to come here. We have no say in it at all. We find out that some of those groups are disproportionately criminal. Yeah. The Albanian, off the scale. How can one community have so much criminality in it? A sensible government would say we're not going to have this, and change what is happening. They're not doing it,
and ban Albanians from ever coming to the country.
It's a rational, evidence-based
policy. And take all of the Albanians who are in prison, who account for the largest number of foreign prisoners in our prison system, and deport them all.
But they again get the theory. Why is it happening? The problem is that they can't. There's no amount of suffering basically, and this is suffering. Because if you look at the criminality, it's 130,000 arrests by foreigners last year. Yeah. This is people getting attacked and hurt and raped and killed in some cases. The problem with the progressive is that the progressive, there's no amount of pain that they're prepared to put on the society to fulfil their little dreams of utopia. Yeah. They want this wonderful society, and they cannot see
what do you think's
what's in front
behind
of
it.
them.
It's a kind of derangement.
It's derangement, yeah.
But how do they get to that place where, I mean, you and I are talking here as two rational human beings, I think. I don't think either one of us would be described by anyone except for Keir Starmer as far right. You know, we've grown up in this country. I grew up in a mostly white neighbourhood, which was North London, as it was then. It's still a relatively white neighbourhood. It hasn't changed much, but there's a lot of foreigners now who have come in. That's part of the course. You know, I went to school in a relatively white school. I think we had one or two black kids in the school. I went through most of my life knowing people from Britain, right? I went and lived in America. New York was a very open place to me. I couldn't believe quite how many people were there. It was a melting pot. But everybody who was there was American.
Yeah.
It didn't matter whether they were Russians or whether they were Israelis or where they came from. They were all Americans, right? Yeah. That's not the case here. The people who are now here, who occupy the city that I live in, who are from other countries, and it's got nothing to do with their skin colour. No, none of them are British.
Cultural, yeah.
They don't want to be British.
But we don't.
Spanish don't want to be British.
But we don't.
The French don't want to be British.
But we don't ask. There's no. I sometimes tease people when I'm debating them on what is the policy. You know, how well has your integration policy gone over the last 40 years? Well, there isn't one, and there never has been one.
No.
What you've got is complete reckless neglect. Let's try this experiment and see how it works out. And it doesn't work.
And it's the same all over Europe.
All over
Every
Europe,
single Western European country's got the same problem.
Yeah, and as I say, look at the interviews. Look at some of the interviews recently about this appalling gang rape outrage. Look at the interviews of the progressives that are trying to bat it back, and they're discombobulated. They can't. Their world is sort of falling apart, and it's like sort of last stages of Marxist. You know, it's when their system literally collapses. Yeah. It's over.
All they can say is that but by far and away the biggest number of people who are sexually abused by people that they know in their own family. So this doesn't count.
No, but that's
that's not the point.
Mike, no, but honestly, you're a journalist. That type of journalism should be shamed out of existence.
I agree.
Because if you don't understand proportionality and a group that's overrepresented. Lots of groups are overrepresented and underrepresented in different categories of crime. In this particular category, a particular group is massively overrepresented. To deny that is, you've got to be thick to deny that.
Well, Starmer is one of those thick people, and unfortunately, so far, his MO seems to be that he doesn't change his mind. He doesn't admit he's made a mistake. No. If he says he's not going to do an inquiry here, he probably won't. And I think that will be his downfall.
He won't do one because one of the it's funny, I was doing an interview with someone yesterday talking about, it was a long 2-hour podcast. They're talking about how the Labour Party differs from the Tories and how the Tories are really quite you might find this odd, but it's sort of innocent really. They're sort of unworldly. They're sort of, you know, what's this woke thing? You know, sort of walking around, hello birds, remember Fotherington Thomas, you know, hello birds, hello sky. Actually the Labour Party's hard as nails. Yeah. They are hard as nails. There won't be an inquiry. They'll just bludgeon this out. They don't care.
Right. But he will find, I think, that whether it's this or whether it's the next thing that he doesn't do right, I still say, and I've been saying it since July, he won't last. He just cannot. I don't see it.
You're persuading me of that.
I think something will happen. I still don't know what it is.
No.
But it's going to be something random.
Yeah, could be.
You know, or some other secret that comes out about him that we haven't been previously shared with. But listen, great to talk to you, William Cleason. Thank you very much indeed, leader of the SDP.